Hey everyone, and welcome to this premium note. Think of this as your global masterclass and really a one-on-one professional mentorship session rolled into one. I'm absolutely thrilled to be your guide today as we unpack the foundational blueprint of the modern web. Whether your goal is to launch a startup, kick off a freelance career, or just innovate from within a massive enterprise, truly understanding the invisible architecture of the internet is step one. It's literally the gateway to thriving in today's digital economy. So, let's jump right in.
It's a simple, everyday action, right? We all do it dozens of times a day. You type a web address, hit enter, and boom, instantly a fully formed page is just sitting there on your screen. But have you ever stopped to think about what actually happens in those crucial milliseconds? Opening up that curiosity loop reveals this wild, invisible, high-speed journey. It's a highly orchestrated series of events that doesn't just power global communication. It's the absolute engine driving modern digital wealth building.
So here's our roadmap for this note. We're going to cover the web request journey, the client-server model, the real difference between websites and web apps, front-end, back-end, and databases, three-tier web architecture, and finally, choosing your tech stack. By the time we wrap up, you're going to understand this entire blueprint so you can really start your own digital journey.
All right, let's get into section 1, the web request journey, from URL to pixels. Every single digital interaction, even the ones powering multi-million-dollar SaaS apps, starts with one highly orchestrated request. But before a connection can even be made, your browser has to know exactly where to go. Enter DNS, or the Domain Name System. The easiest way to think about this is like the internet's phone book. We humans are great at remembering names like Google.com, but computers, they only talk in numerical IP addresses. DNS bridges that gap. And to make sure this lookup is blazingly fast, the data gets cached across multiple layers, from your browser, right down to your operating system, all the way to your internet service provider.
Let's break down the invisible mechanics of what happens next. Once you type that URL and the DNS lookup finds the right IP address, your browser doesn't just grab the site. First, it has to establish a secure connection through what we call a TCP handshake. Once that connection is locked in and solid, your browser finally sends an HTTP request. And only then does the server actually process that request and fire back a response packed with all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript needed to paint those beautiful pixels right onto your screen.
Now you might be wondering, why should I care about these technical steps? Well, because understanding this foundation translates directly into real-world business value. Knowing exactly how DNS, caching, and infrastructure routing work opens up some incredibly high-paying career and monetization opportunities. Whether you want to start a hosting business, offer cloud consulting, or get into infrastructure engineering, this knowledge right here is the absolute bedrock of digital income.
Moving right along to section 2, the client-server model. This is the true engine of the internet. The client-server model is basically the fundamental request and response cycle that governs almost all web traffic today. Clients request the resources, and the servers process those requests and deliver the data back. Emphasizing this centralized management is super important, because having the server control the data dramatically improves security, consistency, and overall reliability across the whole network.
To put it in everyday terms, think of the client, like your web browser or your phone's mobile app, as a customer placing an order. The server, which might be running something like Apache or Nginx behind the scenes, acts as the fulfillment center. The client basically says, hey, I need this data, and the server does all the heavy lifting to go find it, package it up neatly, and ship it right back.
Okay, section 3, websites versus web apps. Passive reading versus active interaction.
I absolutely love this quote from Sam Morgan because it just perfectly clears up a very common confusion. A website is something that a user reads, a web application is something that they interact with. It permanently sets that boundary between just passively consuming content and actively participating in it.
Let's drill down into that a bit more. A website is generally pretty static and passive. Think of a local bakery's homepage, a personal blog, or a photography portfolio. Visitors consume the content, but they aren't changing anything. A web app, on the flip side, is highly dynamic. Think Gmail or Airbnb. These platforms need user authentication, personal profiles, and active data storage, because what the user does fundamentally shapes the whole experience.
So, the big takeaway here? If you want to build a highly scalable SaaS startup, you are building a web application, not just a website. Web apps need user authentication, real-time data updates, and some serious data processing. They rely super heavily on complex back-end logic to function. This is where the truly tough problems are solved, and honestly, where the real massive business value is created. let's move to section 4, front-end, back-end, and databases. We're going to use a restaurant analogy for this.
This is honestly my favorite way to illustrate the whole ecosystem. Think of your web application as a restaurant. The customer sitting at the table, that's your user. The waiter taking the order is your web server. The kitchen, where everything gets prepared and cooked up, is your back-end logic. And the food finally delivered to the table, that's your website content. The user never actually sees the kitchen, right? But that is exactly where all the heavy lifting, security, and complex business logic goes down.
So, while the front end handles the gorgeous aesthetic of the dining area, you know, the UI, the UX, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript running right in the user's browser, the back end is securely locked away on the server. The back end reliably manages all the business logic, the APIs, and the databases to make sure the front end gets exactly what it needs, exactly when it needs it.
And here's where it gets really exciting for your skill set. When you master both of these domains, you become what's known as a full-stack developer. You literally bridge the gap. Mastering both the beautiful visual front-end interfaces and the robust, powerful back-end server logic turns you into a versatile powerhouse. You become fully capable of launching end-to-end startup projects or freelancing high-value custom solutions all on your own. It's a total game changer.
Which brings us to section 5, three-tiered web architecture, structuring for scale.
Now, to scale effectively, big industry-grade web apps utilize a three-tier architecture. First, you've got your presentation layer, which is the front-end UI. Then you have your application layer, which holds all that important business logic. And critically, you have a completely separate data layer, which is the database server. By separating things out like this, the database is never directly exposed to the client, which just massively improves your whole system's security.
And because these layers are completely decoupled, you can actually upgrade them independently. If your presentation layer needs a fresh new redesign, you don't have to go tear down and rebuild the database. Understanding this specific setup is the absolute secret to building resilient, future-ready enterprise systems that can handle massive amounts of global traffic without breaking a sweat.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, choosing your tech stack. These are the tools you need to build and monetize.
Here, we're comparing two massive industry standards, the MERN stack and the LAMP stack. MERN stands for MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. It uses JavaScript across the entire full stack, and it is perfectly suited for modern, API-driven SaaS web apps and fast-moving startups. On the other hand, the LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, remains this incredibly stable, time-tested champion. It's perfect for traditional content management systems like WordPress and your standard, reliable business websites.
So the crucial point for you is choosing the stack that actively aligns with your specific career and wealth-building goals. If you want to launch a modern SaaS startup or dive into full-stack React freelancing, the MERN stack is totally your pathway. But if you want to run a highly profitable web dev agency, building custom WordPress sites for clients, or maybe take on really stable enterprise backend roles, LAMP is definitely the way to go.
Well, we've covered the fundamental blueprints of the digital economy in this note. From those hidden milliseconds of a DNS lookup all the way to the heavy lifting of a three-tier web architecture, you now possess the knowledge of how the modern web actually functions. The tools are out there, and the opportunities for innovation and, yes, monetization are literally boundless. You know how the web works. The only question left is, what are you going to build next?